Ready. Play.
Well, hello there, and welcome to Talking Tennis. And this is WTA Weekly. I'm very happy to have Vanch here alongside me, fresh from the ground on San Diego. Vanch, how you doing?
Doing great, Nick. Had a great week and really excited to talk some tennis with you.
I'm been excited to talk tennis with you. It's especially since I'm going to be honest, I'm going to be relying a lot on you this episode. Not only because you probably would have seen the majority of matches that took place from being on the ground in San Diego, which is the kind of the main talking point, I think, from this week, but also due to the time zone that San Diego was in, it was impossible for me to watch most of the matches. The final started at midnight my time. So only some bouts of sleeplessness meant I could actually keep up with what was going on. So those of us, obviously, American fans will probably know about this and see everything. And Ghost is right to say that Vanch is the American of the hour for what will be a very American-themed show because, well, let's face it, this week's been all about the performance of a lot of Americans. Yet, it wasn't an American who won San Diego. It was a Czech, as per usual. Barbora Krejcikova is the San Diego champion in singles and doubles. So, Vanch, talk to me. I didn't see the final. How would you summarize the match? Tell me what happened.
Sure. I mean, the final was actually very good, very high quality, really good level. I was very pleasantly surprised to see the stands completely packed on Saturday. I guess that just made me happy because the tournament was having some attendance issues earlier on in the week, but the later on we got during the week, the night matches became more and more packed, and that's what you want to see, obviously, with an event like this. But the two players in the final, it was a great story for both because they're both resurgent in many ways this week, and this was Kenin's first final since 2020 Roland Garros at the WTA level. So it's been over 3 years, and she finally managed to put together some really good wins this week. And she was a bit. I thought she was going to be a bit compromised going into the final, actually, because she had her leg taped the whole week, and we were supposed to do a full press conference with her after her semifinal win, but what ended up happening is she lost her voice, actually, and so she couldn't do the press. She couldn't do the on-court interview, and then during the press conference, we kind of had to just get some quotes from her, and she was only able to speak for 1 minute. Obviously, nice of her to do that. But coming into the final, the final itself, I thought the match was decided on a few key moments in the third set. But the way this match kind of unfolded was we saw a lot of court craft, a lot of guile from both players. Krejcikova, I thought, was serving the better of the two. Earlier on, she had this one game in the first set where she had 4 aces and got out of it, and 3 of them were in a row. And I was like, oh my goodness, she's just turned into Ivo Karlovic. but that aside, and Kenin brought her usual feistiness to the court. She was, doing those backhand slices that are really hard to read. Krejcikova was just had a bit more weight on her shots, and it was actually Kenin who broke twice. First in the first set, the real key game in the first set was at 4-3. Kenin was serving at 30 all, and Krejcikova hits these 2 amazing forehands, manages to break back. Not a whole lot that Kenin did wrong, to be honest, and it came down to this one game in the second at 4-5, where Kenin had 3 game points, but Krejcikova was able to get her way out of trouble. And each time it was some good shot making or just a loose error from Kenin in some big moments, but it was Krejcikova who put the pressure on her. And so I felt like it was going to be a tough reset for Kenin. And to her credit, she managed to do it in the second set. And it was in the second set, actually, we had some really close, hard-fought games in the beginning. The crowd was really getting into it because they wanted to see a comeback from Sofia, and she had majority of the crowd support, and she was the one that was the more emotive of the two, as you would expect. Just really trying to get into it with the crowd, with her box, and just fire herself up a little bit. And the key game there was that she went up a break and she was up 3-2 and she had to save 4 break points, and that's where she showed her real mettle. I thought kind of it reminded me a little bit of some of the Australian Open of 2020 that we saw, where she was just really really clutch in some big points, coming up with big serves out wide, redirecting the ball into the open court really really well. She has this way of playing where you just can't read her shots because she's able to disguise them so well and just keep the opponent on the move, and it's deceptively aggressive. And Krejcikova was starting to miss a little bit more. Her level started to dip a little bit midway through that second set when she didn't break back. But once Kenin held for 4-2, I thought Krejcikova was trying to conserve a little bit of energy and get ready to make a strong push at the start of the third. And I think the final really elevated itself in the third set because that's where we saw both players really play some of their best tennis at the very same time. And the first 8 games of the match, Nick, there were no breaks, there were no break points for either player. So if something had to give, and and it was starting to get really tense there at the very end with Krejcikova serving at 4-5, 15-40. And so if Kenin breaks here, she's going to serve for the match. And she has all the momentum of the second set, and she was looking the stronger of the two players at that moment. And then what ended up happening in that game was every single breakpoint save that Krejcikova had, she had to hit a second serve. And she came up with really, really gutsy second serves into the body, forcing Kenin to miss backhands because they were so deep and so well hit at like 95, 96 miles per hour. And so she was doing really well to kind of force errors. Kenin will have some regrets. I think there was one break point where she had a very good look on a second serve at 30-40, and she just missed it in the net. But I thought it was just guts from Krejcikova and really playing some of her best tennis. There was this one really good half volley that she hit at deuce, where she was just able to massage the ball in the corner, and with some of her double skills that really paid off at times in this match, with just her good touch and just her ability to manipulate the ball, move it around the court in different ways and spins. And that's what I really enjoyed about this match, is both players brought so much. There was so much diversity in every single point. You didn't know what you were going to get, and these two hadn't played each other in over 2.5 years, and their last match was on clay in Rome of 2021. So there's really not that much data coming in, but it was really cool to see these points kind of play out. And once Krejcikova hit an ace to hold, then you knew the next game was going to be really, really difficult for Kenin. And she did have 3 game points in the very next game, and after every single game point that she missed, the cameras all looked at her dad, who was more like a dad than a coach in this match, I would say. Just he knows how much this means for Kenin, and he was just deflated after every single miss and just kind of shrugging his shoulders, putting his head down. And so there was some talk about that, of course, but I think it was just a well-played match overall. I looked at the stats at the end, and there were more winners than unforced errors for both players, and that's not always the case in some of these big matches. And at the end, I think it was Krejcikova's clutchness on her second serve. She won 10 out of 14 points in the third set on her second serve. So that was a really big stat for her, and that all came to fruition in that 4-all game that I was just talking about. And so that ultimately I think made the difference. And she was a bit in and out from the baseline. Kenin had the edge on some occasions, but the serves really bailed her out on some really big occasions. And if I look at the first set and the third set, Kenin in the first set 2 for 11 on second serve points won, and in the third set she was 3 for 12. And she didn't do a whole lot wrong on some of these big points. Krejcikova just came up with some. Krejcikova really stepped it up, but overall just a very entertaining final, a really good finish. Krejcikova winning the singles and the doubles, and a lot of positives to take away for Kenin as well. And she's back inside the top 50. She can really build on this, I think, going forward.
I wish I'd seen it now, especially when you said it was a match all about Courtcroft. That's exactly the kind of match I enjoy watching. Yeah. Sadly, I think it has disappeared from catch up now, so I'll have to wait for someone to eventually put it up, maybe. But it was it sounds like it was an interesting one, and it's interesting the connection that's getting made here between Krejcikova and clutch. And she's had a few clutch wins in her career. I'm thinking of 2021 Roland Garros semi-final against Sakkari. That win against Swiatek in Ostrava last year. The turnaround against Sabalenka in Dubai earlier this year. even that straight set to win against Muguruza in 2021 US Open, okay, straight sets, but Muguruza looked like she was coming back into that match. Krejcikova is a very hard player to put away, and she doesn't give up easily. And actually, she showed that in a match I did see, was the semi-final against Danielle Collins, in that she soaked up everything Collins threw at her and then struck when she needed to. Yeah, I think she definitely deserves to return to the top 10, which she is going to now, at least temporarily. Yeah, I'm impressed with her. I'm impressed with her ability to do that, and that's what makes her a top player. So it seems weird to me that she wasn't top 10 before.
Yeah, she had a very good week in Dubai, like you referenced. She saved all those match points against Kenin, which was the key, and then ultimately she beat those top 3 players like in Pegula, Sabalenka, and then obviously Iga in the final. And since then, we kind of, everyone was talking about, oh, maybe there's a big 4, like Ghosty is referencing in the chat. But I think that kind of got in her head a little bit, because the next 3 tournaments she lost to Sabalenka, if I remember correctly, in Indian Wells, Miami, and Stuttgart. And at that point, I think she made a comment in Miami that she wants to be more heard and seen as part of the so-called big 3 at that time of the WTA. But after that, she had a few dips, and she didn't have a great clay court season. I remember this one match against Ostapenko in Rome where she had a bazillion chances in the first set, but didn't end up taking it. And granted, you're playing Ostapenko, so it's always going to be an up and down match. But from there, she lost the first round of Roland Garros. So then she had an injury at Wimbledon, which she referenced in her post-match conference. And I think that really kind of derailed her, because then she stopped working with her coach, who was with her at the time. And now she just has one person on her team who's just kind of more of a supporting figure in her camp and just helping her temporarily. And she said it did not go well for her in the US Open stretch. And she lost early in Cincy and Cleveland, I believe, and also at the US Open. So she needed a real reset here. And I think she was just able to find it. She said that she enjoyed the accommodations that she had in San Diego. She enjoyed the kind of the off-court stuff, going to the beach, and just the calm vibe of it all. The weather. I think she just loved that she could also go under the radar, I feel like, at points in this tournament, because there were some matches that she played on center court. Like I'm thinking of the one against Kalinina in the first round, where almost no one was watching her because they all wanted to see Ostapenko versus Collins. And Ostapenko versus Collins was not on the center court, so they were all in a kind of tightly packed outside court, watching that happen. And so I think she was able to kind of divert the attention a little bit away from her, if that makes sense, and just kind of let her tennis do the talking. And then I think by the time most people really got to see her was in that Collins match that you're talking about in the semis. So that match and the final were really impressive from her.
Yeah, that scheduling of putting Ostapenko Collins, I don't know why that wasn't on the main court, because you've got a Grand Slam finalist against a Grand Slam champion, and one of them is American. And okay, Kalinina is a very good player, and I consider her a top class player, along with Krejcikova. But yeah, that was an interesting scheduling choice there. But hey, maybe it added to the atmosphere of the smaller court, so can't complain. But yeah, I completely agree with you. This result is the shot on the arm Krejcikova's season needed. I don't think she's the big 4. Goff's probably got pole position for that status, but she could probably establish herself as someone like a Jabeur or a Mustafa or a Pegula, as someone you shouldn't count out. But she needs to obviously produce that consistently at the minute, which we know and because we know right when she does produce the level, it's so good.
Yes, it is. It's sublime, because she has such an all-court game where she acts as kind of a pace absorber at times, just deflecting the pace and big shots of her opponent. But then she also has, a really, really underrated serve, where she can just fire aces on a whim, and she has really good spot serves. She is able to adjust her strokes depending on the incoming ball that's coming at her, and then she has really good hands at the net. And that all comes from all of her double success. I love the way she can kind of vary her shots mid-rally as well. Like she throws in more of those loopier, heavier moon balls, and then she gets a short ball that she really wants, and she pounces, and then she can finish it off at the net with a really reliable net game. And then and I just think she just frustrates you because she just is one of those players that's so difficult to finish off because she's just gonna. It's that clutch factor deep into tournaments of having been in those situations so many times, even though there were in doubles a lot of the times, but also just like she tends to win all of her titles in bunches. And I was noticing this earlier. Like she won Strasbourg and Roland Garros, and then last year she won Ostrava and Tallinn, and she just kind of is able to carry the momentum for the whole week and sometimes 2 weeks.
With that in mind, is she potentially making a mistake with skipping Guadalajara?
We tried to ask her about that, but it seems like she was just very fatigued after this week because of those long matches in the semis and the final, but also just the emotional toll of the doubles. And so sometimes when she goes deep in weeks like these, she says that she kind of needs some time to reset. I mean, I was also kind of curious about her because she is 12th in the race right now. And there is some opening, especially with how the Guadalajara field is looking, where like 13 of the top 30 players aren't even playing, and there's no one in the top 7. And the top seed is Jabeur, who's not in great form, and Sakari and Garcia aren't all that convincing at the moment. So I thought she was going to just go ahead and play it, but I guess she's just
she would
going
be
to
the
rest.
red hot favorite for it, I think, if she did.
Yeah, certainly with the form coming in.
But fatigue. She has to manage that. I did wonder if it was to do with that maybe she didn't think she could make the trip.
Yeah.
But because San Diego to Guadalajara is you're crossing time zones. It's a long distance. It's not as close as maybe people who are less familiar with geography think. But yeah, it's something to consider. But like that sets up well for the Asian swing anyway, and going in, so that should be good. Let's talk about Kenin. Obviously, you said that both finalists would have been probably worthy winners. It sounded like it was a great match. I think let's face it, if Kenin had won, it no offense to Krejcikova, it probably would have been a bigger story. Because obviously of where she's come from. And you're right, she's back in the top 50 now. She's so close to being sort of back in the big time. Is it too much to expect that for her to produce this kind of level consistently now?
I think there's going to be ups and downs just naturally with her game, just because she doesn't have an overwhelmingly big weapon. And I think with players like that, she's just going to go through some more up and down weeks where she might get hit off the court, or she might just not find her range. She might not just be allowed to, work the points the way that she wants to. And I think she's just susceptible to injuries as well. Like this week, she was struggling with the sickness, of course, but also just her leg was taped up the whole week. I think sometimes she hasn't been able to practice the way she would have liked the last couple of years. There's obviously the coaching and dad relationship with her father, which doesn't always mesh well in certain environments against certain players. So I do expect her to kind of have more consistency. She already kind of did this year. Like we saw glimpses of it. Obviously, she beat Sabalenka in Rome. She had the win over Goff at Wimbledon. So the top level is certainly there. She pushed Rybakina. I think she made the semis of Hobart. And I think with climbing up the rankings, she'll have better draws. So that should help her rather than drawing top players always early in the first weeks. She is going to be playing in Guadalajara. She is in the draw. So maybe that's another chance to like push her way up and try to get seeded by the time the Australian Open is there, or finish the year in the top 25 or top 30, where she certainly belongs.
And the Australian Open, of course, is where she won her major title, her current only major title back in 2020, where I think she was one of the players of the season. She was obviously Australian Open champion, Roland Garros finalist. I don't think she was really talked about enough. I don't remember the hype being as big for her as for other young players who were coming through at the time, like Osaka, who was kind of probably sell a lot of the headlines that year. Why do you think that is? And maybe just remind us sort of, what was it about Kenin's game that took her to that major title?
Well, I think she's just a tough player to game plan against because of the way she kind of manipulates the shots, and she's so I guess the word she always describes herself as feisty. So I just go with that because that's what I heard a bunch in the press conference. But she's almost like she has this like street fighter mentality where it's just she's just gonna grit her teeth and just scrap her way into the fight. She's like a scrapper, and she's deceptively quick. She moves really really well. Her ball toss is one of the most and service motion is one of the more funkier ones you'll see because she doesn't actually make contact with the ball as she's tossing it, and she kind of looks at it briefly, but after she's already hit the ball, and it's very difficult to kind of read where that serve is going, where it's going. Is she going to serve wide T? Like most players, you can just kind of tell by the ball toss or where they're kind of looking while they have it up in the motion. So that could be part of it, and also she's just very clever in terms of how she has two hands on the backhand, but she'll just take one hand off and just kind of go to a short slice or go to a drop shot when you're least expecting it. I think she just had, when all that momentum and confidence is working with her, she's just been able to frustrate a lot of players with her unorthodox game. And so that's what I think made her so successful. I do think of the quicker conditions would help her a little bit more just because of it would just help her shots penetrate. They stay very low. She doesn't hit the ball with a tremendous amount of spin. So it certainly surprised me when she made the final of Roland Garros because she lost. That was a weird one for me because she lost to Azarenka in Rome, 6-0, 6-0, and no one was really expecting her to make it. I guess she just kind of gritted her way out of some tough fourth round quarterfinals in that tournament. But she has certainly shown it on all surfaces. She has a title on grass too. She has 5 WTA titles, I believe. So I do think
maybe something about what was my earlier question of like why was it underrating it? Maybe it was to do with that 2020 season, despite those 2 strong slam performances. That 6-love loss to Azarenka took a lot of the wind out of her sails. And I think her US Open was a little underwhelming. Did she make 4th round, something like that? And I think more was expected, obviously, with the momentum of the home slam, but COVID probably had a lot to do with that.
Yeah, I think it was the COVID as well, like because not many American audience were tuned in for that Roland Garros, just because it was in the fall and like other sports were starting to come back. The vibe was a little bit different than your May French Open, so that could have something to do with it. And also maybe just there was a lot more hype on Goff at the time, and she beat Goff in the 4th round on the way to the title at AO. Everyone just kind of remembers her when they do hype her up. The people that do, they remember her for that 2-all love 40 game against Muguruza in the 3rd set, where she just hit like 4 winners, and then Muguruza just couldn't hold serve after that. But I'm also wondering if it's just maybe just the way that she carries herself. She doesn't have a tremendous amount of excitement when she wins. It's almost just a relief, It's almost like a relief of all that tension and stress that's just bottled up inside of her when she wins. And I think even after she won her semifinal, I was expecting it to be like, a kind of an emotional moment. And in some ways it was, but it was more just her going to her box and her team and just really crying because just releasing that emotion, and just she wasn't feeling well. It had more to do with her health condition actually rather than actually getting to the final. So maybe there's just some of that, but it's tough to pinpoint one reason.
Yeah, it's half tough to point it. And at the time as well, I remember in 2020, I think Andreescu hadn't played all year. There was a lot of hype from her amazing 2019 season. Sarkis,
most of the hype was on
Piontek, obviously beating her in the Roland Garros final was another young player breaking through at the same time.
Yeah. I think it also just happened too quickly for her, where I just don't think she was ready for that spotlight quite so soon.
It wasn't anything bigger than a 250 at that point. Okay, she'd won 3 in a year, which is very impressive, and very few players do that.
Yeah. I think she was 21 when she won. I think she was 21 when she won Australia, and she had a good year the year before that, but no one was really expecting her to go all the way and win the Australian Open and take out the players that she did. I think it was not expected of her to all of a sudden win a major. and then
I
back it
certainly
up.
didn't expect it.
She was kind of in that 10 to 20 range.
Yeah, it's interesting what you were saying about Kenin's game as well, like the way you're describing it. I'm wondering, would it be fair to say that we'd put it in kind of the kind of Ash Barty-esque kind of style, Karolina Muchova?
A little bit, although those players have some more obvious weapons that you can point to. Like with Ash, obviously you have the serve and the forehand. Those are still like pretty big weapons, I would say. Same thing with Muchova, like her forehand is a pretty big weapon. I don't know. Like I would say the male comp for it is like Jensen Brooksby, but I don't know if there's any. I don't know if she's kind of on her own a little bit in that regard. She's kind of like an Elise Mertens with like more variety. I don't know, or like
Mertens is a Grand Slam semi-finalist
because
so.
it's like counter punching, but she's giving you different looks every single time. So it's like kind of your Svitolina and Mertens, but just Wozniacki model, but with just a lot more change-ups of pace.
I do enjoy watching the new version of Svitolina, so maybe I need to. I haven't watched a Kenin match in ages. Like I missed the Kenin Goff match because I was at Wimbledon that day, and I was watching outside courts, and I couldn't find a spot on the big screen to watch it. But I gather it was a good one. And you always think about Kenin being a scrapper, like so's Goff. So I want to see more matches between them because that could turn into a real street fight.
Yeah.
Okay, so lots of positives for Sofia Kenin going forward. Let's not put too much pressure on her kind of going forward. What would you say were the other kind of big stories coming out of San Diego other than the two finalists?
Well, Emma Navarro was a big one, getting to the semis. She qualified. She's obviously the daughter of Ben Navarro, who owns the Charleston tournament. There's been she's been rising through the pro ranks more this year. But mainly, I think the big win was against Sakari in the quarters, where she got bageled in the second set, and then that was one of the higher quality sets of the tournament. That third set between those two, where they were just hitting the ball so big from the back of the court, and just really, really good baseline battle in the third set, where it came down to the third set tiebreak, and that's where her poise and her composure really impressed me, because she's another player who just really doesn't show any emotion on the court. She's very kind of reserved and contained, and very stoic, I would say, and so that helps her in some big moments, particularly against Sakari, who was just a lot more highly stressed and wound up, and she played a very poor first 3-4 points of the tiebreak, and it was just too big of a hole for her to come back. But I was impressed by what I saw from Navarro. She has a very good backhand return. She goes big on the forehand when she needs to. She kind of has a very complete kind of all-round game. There's not one thing that she does particularly amazing that stands out, but it's just more how she carries herself on the court. And I think it was just due for her to get a big result. So that was good to see, because she gave me this one line in the press conference that really stood out. She said, "I keep my standards very high, but my expectations really low." So I thought that kind of summed her up well. And then it was a good effort against Kenin also to come back and win the second set. She was down 5-1 in the third, but she made it close again and forced Kenin to come up with some good stuff at the end to close it out 6-4. So I would say she's also in the top 50 now. And I think she's always going to get some help with wild cards and things like that, just because of the background. But she's another one of those like Pegula, who's very down to earth and humble despite her wealth.
Interesting. And yeah, Ghosty in the chat suggesting that she'd be baby Peg. But so it'd be interesting to see what happens when those two play each other. I mean, by the sound of it, Emma Navarro is going to be a nightmare draw potentially, or tough draw for people going into 1000s and majors, at least for the next 6 months or so while she stays top 50. I don't know, depends on how long she's top 50 for, maybe 3 months. Like she could be still top 50 by AO. It depends on how the rest of the season plays out, but definitely in a major first round could be a tricky one for people to deal, for a top player to deal with.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and then I would say in the early rounds, it was good to see Beatrice Haddad Maya live because I've seen her on TV, but TV just kind of doesn't do justice with her game because
Okay.
she stands really close to the baseline, but she's also hitting the ball a lot harder than I thought because it doesn't always come across on TV, and she just looks like such a counter puncher. But then when I watch her play, I'm like, oh, she's very creative. She's opening up these angles really, really well. She's going down the line pretty often. Her backhand is really flat. She also has a pretty good transition game. And she's just very clever, and she doesn't miss much. Like you really have to earn it. She kind of reminds me of like a female Cam Nori when I watch her play because she just brings a certain kind of level, and it's like if you want to be a top 10 player, like you kind of have to go through her. So she kind of reminds me of that, and also just how she uses the angles really well with her lefty serve, and then she's being aggressive by standing up on the baseline, and she doesn't have huge swings either, so she's able to just rush her opponents in different ways. It was fun to watch her play against Fernandez. There was just a lot of lefty versus lefty creativity. Fernandez did well to come back and win the second set. She had to save a match point, and so that was a good effort.
I really wish I'd seen that match. Obviously, I'm a Fernandez fan, but when I saw that draw, I was like, oh, please be on at a time I could actually watch it. But they put it on at what would be like 2-3 a.m. my time, so which is understandable because it would be the biggest match. You put it on at night, so you get the crowd, you get the views. It
her
was the right
biggest strength, Haddad Maya, for me, is like her fitness.
Yeah,
like she could just go run and run and run for hours. It doesn't surprise me that most of the matches she plays are like 3-set wars with the style.
Because you can't put her away.
Yeah, because it's just so hard to get the ball by her. She defends really well. Her and Vondrousova are pretty good defenders.
Can you imagine if those two played each other?
Yeah, it would be like 3 hours. I mean, she already had like those matches on the way to Roland Garros in the semis. Like
Sarah Srivastava
match. Yeah, Sarah Srivastava. That was crazy. I mean, that just has 4 hours written all over it. And then I watched her play against Kostyuk, and that was interesting also because I guess Kostyuk is another one of those players who just her mentality is a little bit fragile right now, but the game is there. You know what I mean? Like I just feel like she hits the ball really big off both wings. She should be doing even better than she is. Granted, she's young, she's 21, but she's just a little too emotional. Like she gets the highs are really, really high. She celebrates like crazy after every single point, and then when she loses, it's so much negativity to her box. Like I could just hear all of it because I was basically courtside for it. Like pretty close to her.
Potapova is a similar player to that.
Yes, Potapova and Kostyuk very similar in that regard, and that's what happened to Potapova also in the quarters that she lost. She was just Kenin was just a lot more willing to dig in, and just despite all the misses that she was having early on in that match, she was just shrugging those off easier, and just the attitude was more positive.
Yeah, so it was interesting to see some players up close live. I mean, Haddad Maya, definitely someone I think is often gets overlooked despite her kind of keynote results. You didn't get a press conference with her, did you?
No, I didn't manage to actually. She didn't. No one. We requested her, but it was just so late when she finished her matches.
Yeah, makes sense.
That she just needed to recover.
Yeah, that would make sense. I mean, talk to me a little bit about. We've talked a bit about. Obviously, you've watched certain players live and the experience of watching that, and it is interesting. Was this your first time actually covering a tournament? What was that like for you?
Yeah, I've covered tournaments in like different settings. Like, for the US Open, I was doing it remotely as a research analyst. And then for Cincinnati, I was doing like graphics in the production trucks behind the courts for the stats that you see at the end of every set in the match, and just logging individual point scores and stuff. So that was a different way of covering it. But this was, and I had been credentialed at San Diego before a couple of years ago, but that was when they were doing remote press conferences, so it wasn't nearly the same. But this time being on site was really cool because they don't do like the press conferences in a separate interview room. It's just outside in like this covered area, but it's outdoors and it's pretty close to the court. So you can sometimes hear the noise. Yeah, that's probably the most annoying thing. All the players will say that. Everyone covering the tournament will say it. It's so close to the airport. It's kind of an extension of the airport, and you'll just hear planes constantly in the middle of answers or in the middle of first and second serve sometimes, and the umpire has to stop the shot clock because it's so loud. But it was cool to have that player access, and because it was so close to the courts, and it was so close to the player locker room, and it was so close to where the communications person would come out and bring the players, you felt like you were right there with them the whole week, because of how the tennis center is structured and where the media room is. So that was pretty nice, and it didn't feel like the questions were very high stake or there were major journalists on site like writing for the Guardian or big international news publications. They were your local reporters, like for the San Diego Union Tribune, which is a newspaper that covers everything, not just tennis. And then there were a few others like from the Tennis One app or for tennis.com or Tennis Channel, but there weren't that many media members. So it felt like I could ask 2 or 3 questions and even get a follow-up if I wanted to. So that was good. And I feel like the WTA comms director was good about keeping it short and concise, but also getting the most out of all the media that were trying to ask questions. So on average, the press conferences weren't longer than 6 minutes. The longest press conference we did was actually Emma Navarro after the semifinal, which was 9 minutes, which is crazy that she gave us that much time. But yeah, I like the way they did it minus the planes.
Yeah, I have to say that sounds very similar to how it was in Birmingham when I covered that, and I agree with you. I think certainly the way the WTA are managing it for a small tournament is pretty good, and certainly, yeah, we probably have fewer tennis specific outlets in the UK. Whereas in the US, probably you get a few more in there. So I can imagine it contributes to a great atmosphere where everyone's kind of on the same page. They know that they've got good boundaries in place for everyone knows the kind of right questions to ask. And I have to say, actually, I think your questions were kind of on the money because you were actually asking about the matches a lot of the time compared to some of the other.
I had to resist the urge to go too deep into the matches because I felt like the best questions that they actually liked were the ones that had nothing to do with tennis. It was more like the off-court stuff or just how do you stay in the right frame of mind, like when you're not, in competition. Like, I asked Krejcikova, for instance, for restaurant recommendations, and she actually gave a pretty good answer about cocktail shrimp and Mexican food. And then I would just mix it up because then I would ask about, because I wanted to kind of get a feel for like what were they thinking when they were down break points in the third set, and when they lost that third set after having a lead, like what was going through their head. And that's what I kind of wanted to know. But if you dig so deep into the tactics of it all, like they're just not going to give you anything to work with. But if you're like, if you're one of the first few ones to go and then you ask them right directly about the match, then they might be willing to give you something that you can, like a good quote that you can work with for a good headline, or like just maybe something a bit more low key. So I kind of learned that because like Krejcikova was one of the players who the first press conference that she did, I'll admit, I was like, this isn't going to go down really well because I don't think she's in the right kind of mood right now. But the more she started winning, the better her press conferences became because she was much more engaged. She kind of grew into the tournament the way she grew into the media in terms of providing really good answers as the week went on, because her mood was so good and she was just chilled. She was just loved the vibe of it all. And at the end, she was kind of cracking jokes with us even before we got started with the interviews.
Actually, yeah, I that makes sense from again Krejcikova being at Birmingham. Very similar experience doing that press conference with her, and obviously get everything underway as she went along. When like not many people were requesting her, to be honest. So I don't think she gave many press conferences after that. But yeah, it was a great. But I agree with you, and I can see why the players would relax the more they win as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, but Krejcikova is right. Krejcikova definitely very friendly as her default, I would say. Just don't catch it too early. But
it was that's kind of cool that the Birmingham event you covered, Krejcikova did well and getting to the final, and then now this one.
She's going to watch this and go, I need these people covering every event that I do.
Yeah.
Actually, speaking of a lot of the press conferences, I will round off in San Diego's tournament in a minute, but I think a lot of your press conferences, well, I think one of your, I can't remember whether it was the Zachary one or the Collins one, got a little bit more traction in light of the Halep case.
Yeah, I think that was the Zachary one.
It was the Zachary one, and I think Chris Clary retweeted it. Maybe someone did it, but it was that was interesting seeing her answer on the situation. But yeah, Simona Halep, obviously, for those, most people watching will know or listening will know that she was handed a 4-year ban for doping, and obviously different players reacted in different ways. That was highlighted by Zachary saying, "Oh, now I'm scared of everything I take," and Collins going, just kind of shrugging it off, kind of, "Oh, it's one of those things. We just deal with it." Very interesting kind of player mentalities towards it as well. So, give us your thoughts on. Give us your personal thoughts on the Halep situation, but also maybe any sense that you would have got on how the players are reacting to it.
Yeah, the Halep situation is a really complex one because it took a really long time for the decision to finally be out formally, but I can understand why, because the ITIA had to go through 8,000 pages, I think, of evidence from both Halep and also just from just all the statements that they received. So I can understand that. The decision itself, I read somewhere that it was going to be even more, like even 6 years. So clearly, there was a lot of the drug in her system, and there were some irregularities in her biological passport with the blood samples, but also just the urine samples from March onwards, which is what they found at the U.S. Open when it came back positive. So, and then I think she tried to argue that it was contaminated, and I think what we learned is that there was just so much of it, way above the normal levels, for it to be, just taken. Well, it had to be from another source, basically, than contamination, most likely. So I think we're just waiting for the CIS trial to see if it can be appealed. But she better have a really, really strong case, because the evidence so far doesn't look great for her in terms of it being in her favor. I saw something that Darren Cahill said, but Darren Cahill stopped working with her at the end of 2021. So he really, as far as like just his experience from her, that's all he could really say in terms of her character. But it'll be interesting to see, like, if anything actually happens with the CAS, because 4 years is such a long time. Like, that would be the end of her career effectively, because she'd be 36 by then at the end of the 4 years. So yeah, it's a tough one, but at the same time, like, you have to do it because, integrity of the game, and you have to enforce the rules.
And let's face it, that 2022 season, which is obviously, there's no evidence that she was doping before 2022. She would have been caught. There would have something would have come up by now if it had before then, if it had.
Yeah.
So there's just to dispel people who may be kind of saying that her Grand Slam titles are void. Like, there's just no evidence that she was doping before, when she was winning Grand Slam titles. But that 2022 season was a pretty good one on the whole, up until the ban. 1,000 title in Canada, semi-finals at Wimbledon, semi-finals at Indian Wells.
Yeah.
Whilst it wasn't necessarily helping her dominate the tour, this wasn't a Lance Armstrong Tour de France situation. There could be an argument made that it was benefiting her. Now, Halep is a top 10 player naturally anyway, so it's difficult to say how much of a difference it made. But it's one of those situations. Although obviously, I think one of the report did say that there was a lot of level, particularly high around Wimbledon in the US, and she lost to Sneaker in the first round of the US.
Yeah.
So doping doesn't automatically mean you're going to win. But I agree with you that, yeah, if she can't clear her name, then yeah, her career is pretty much done. She well, not done. She could probably carry on a couple more years, Kanepi style, but wouldn't be contending for the big titles anymore.
Yeah, it would be tough also with her style of game to just like come back into it at 36. And
Would you not say the
try
same
to
thing
find
with
out.
Kanepi though?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess Kanepi is a conundrum.
Yeah, Kanepi conundrum. That's a good alliteration there. Yeah, I think we're kind of on the same page, and that I don't want to go too deep into it. I'm just disappointed, to be honest, because you know I liked Halep. I like Halep. As not, she was never one of my favorites, but always thought she was good for the game in terms of personality, in terms of the difference she brought. I always thought she underperformed in her career, but just always put herself in winning positions and only took half the opportunities. But yeah, so interesting. But yeah, I think my other question was, do you think that most players are going to take the Zachary attitude or the Collins attitude? It's either Collins of just shrugging off, or maybe the extreme usually Bouchard attitude from the Sharapova days.
Yeah, I think most players are gonna have are not gonna have much sympathy for her, if I'm being honest. At least that's the impression that I got. I think Collins definitely didn't. Sakari, I think she was talking about how like the app, the whereabouts app is not fully functional all the time, and she's had some cases where she wakes up in the middle of the night and has to decide, oh, do I go to the restroom now or do I wait till the doping comes? So she sympathized with her in the sense that it's stressful, but she also didn't like directly comment on Halep specifically. So I'm not sure if her answer was just a lot more general about like the testing protocol. But I think most players would probably take the Collins route just because, yeah, I mean they also want to, they want to talk about how it's important for the integrity of the game, and they kind of want to focus more on that. Some players want get a little bit shady about it, and tweet something or the other, like Bouchard or even Serena with her tweet.
Oh yeah.
But so there's going to be some of that, but and that'll definitely start some conversations on Twitter, and the fan bases won't like it, just as was the case with Sharapova. But with Sharapova, at least she was able to kind of clear her name earlier on, and it was a drug that was legal for 11 years, and it just was taken off the list for the 3 weeks that she did take it, and she kind of owned up to it, admitted fault, then got her ban reduced. So we'll see if Halep is able to clear her name in that sense, although I think this will be harder than the Sharapova one. And yeah, at the moment we have to wait and see, but it's not looking good.
No, it's not. So let's talk about happier things. San Diego. Let's go back to sunny San Diego. The meaning of the place will depend on what films you watched. But with San Diego, let's talk about the tournament. Do you think it's going to be a strong warm up for Indian Wells in 2024, given it's being moved to like the week before in the calendar?
Yeah, at first I was really happy to hear that, but then I also realized that there's two 1000s in the Middle East the weeks before, because Doha is a 1000 and Dubai is also a 1000. So I do wonder if
are they definitely not alternating still?
I think starting next year. So this is what I heard from one of the WTA people yesterday in the media room, and he was saying that starting next year it's going to be two 1000s back to back in the Middle East. Wow. And then the week after will be San Diego. So you got to wonder if some of the players will, if this tournament will take a hit because of that. But I really hope not, because yeah, like it has a really good chance to be a strong build up, like for the ATP, like with Acapulco, Indian Wells, and Miami, and obviously they also have Dubai, but I'm wondering if maybe the players who lose early in Dubai, maybe they'll have a stronger week, and so it's going to be tough because they're going to want to prioritize Indian Wells in Miami, I would think, over the 500 in San Diego. But I really hope for the tournament's case, with all the marketing that's going to go into it the next 5 months, certainly, and also just because it's, players will have a chance to also get there early and just use it as a warm up. So
yeah, I tell you what, that is just making the tennis calendar feel even more packed. You've got January Australian swing, February you've got back-to-back 1000s. This is just WTA calendar. I'm not thinking about the ATP right now. Sunshine Double in March, April Madrid, and April you're going to be is probably more of a down month, but you've still got Stuttgart and Madrid. And then May is Rome into Roland Garros, then into the grass season, then to the US swing with the Olympics sometimes, definitely next year. And then, it's like month after month after month of just constant. I'm not going to say as a fan, that's a good thing because you've got a big tournament to look forward to each month. But as a player, that sounds exhausting. And maybe that would explain why the restriction of 250s for the WTA would avoid top player burnout, because then they're just focusing on the 1000s and above and maybe the odd 500.
Oh yeah. Well, in any case, there will be all top 30 players. So I guess that's a good part about it.
Yeah.
And I was actually surprised to see that the field was as strong as it was this year too, because you still had 9 of the top 20. And, we didn't have the usual, your top 6 or top 5, I guess. But despite that, I was pretty happy. I'm pretty happy overall with the depth right now at the top of the WTA, to where I feel confident that we're going to have a pretty good end of the tournament, even if the quote unquote highly ranked players in the top 10 are not in it, like we saw this week.
Yeah, definitely. Positive to come out that. I completely agree. We've been talking about it. Look, even at the top 50, you've got players like Navarro and Kenin, and they're going to be worth watching at any tournament you go to. So before we maybe wrap up on some sort of general points outside of San Diego and Halep and all that, you've obviously covered San Diego before, when it multiple times. You've probably visited the tournament several times. It's pretty local for you, right? What makes it a tournament worth visiting? There's going to be people on the sort of west side of the US where maybe that's their closest event.
I think the location is pretty good. It's fairly close to the beach. It's fairly close to some touristy destinations. There's a theme park right there called SeaWorld, which
I've heard of it,
which there's a lot of water rides, even some roller coasters, and so for the kids, it could be a good way to kind of group it with the tennis. So and then there's plenty of good food places, Mexican food. I think just in general, the fans that come, they seem to come from Latin American countries as well, and just they're more willing to make the trip because they can make a vacation out of it. So I think that's a good thing. The tennis center itself, there's a lot of practice courts. The facility is fairly big. The stadium, they've done a good job in terms of when the tournament is not on versus when the tournament's on to make it bigger and better. The sponsors are more kind of local and well known this year, so there really a lot of time and energy goes in terms of investing money to make this tournament as good as it can be. So those are all some of the good things about it. The fact that it's WTA only and the draw size is smaller, in terms of it's like a 28 player draw, so that every single day you're going to see top players no matter what, especially the kind of round of 16 day. That's a really good day to go because it's the perfect mix of you'll get to watch all the matches, but also you'll get kind of the early round clashes, but you'll also get maybe 1 or 2 matches that could be match of the tournament. And then you also get to be pretty up close with the players, and practices, and yeah, I mean the players generally feel like they're pretty close to the fans, and the food on site is pretty decent too. So yeah, I think they've done a good job in terms of building it up from before, because I only know the event from having played it in juniors. So I played on a lot of those courts, but not when not when there were ATP WTA events, but they have the experience of having hosted, like, for instance, girls nationals or 16s and 18s, which the winner of that usually gets a wild card into the US Open. So and they have a lot of money backing it in, also, like USTA, San Diego, Southern California Tennis Association. So yeah, I trust the people who are in charge of the event, and I have faith that it's going to keep getting bigger and better every year in terms of, like, growing women's sport.
Yeah, I certainly think that moving it to where they are has more potential than risk. I think given they're right after the US Open at the minute, having it in San Diego is like a California swing as a warm up to Indian Wells.
Yeah.
I think there will be some players who would definitely be up for taking that as an opportunity. Ghost wants to know how you did in juniors.
I did well in like 12s and 14s. I would say that was kind of my best stretch before I was 15 or 16. After that, I sort of started prioritizing school a bit more, just because, like, it became more important to do well academically, try to get into a good college. I also was struggling with a bit of a knee injury by the time I was like around 16. So I had to take about 6 or 7 months off for that with rehab and stuff. But I found a way to kind of just play at a decent level, keep it active as much as I can. And then I just was playing competitively. Even if I wasn't in tournaments, I would just sign up for leagues. I would play some matches, and I played a little bit in university too. So I think I was all right in juniors. I probably didn't invest in it completely full time like some of the other players I was playing against were, but I got a cool chance to play against some players which later on started to win a lot more big titles. So that was cool. I have some good memories from it.
Okay, right. I appreciate we're getting on for an hour. I do want to touch on Osaka. Appreciate neither of us have seen it because you were on site in San Diego, and Osaka was in the middle of the night for me, or the night sessions were on when I was supposed to be at work. So couldn't watch any of it. So rather than focusing on the story of the tournament,
I guess I would say just one more thing before we move on, just to kind of put a bow on San Diego. It was also really cool to see how many people showed up for the doubles.
Okay.
Just supporting the doubles every single night. Stadiums felt pretty packed, and because they wanted to get the most out of the ticket. And also, I think what was riding this whole doubles this week was Coco Vandeweghe, because it was her last tournament officially, and she only entered the doubles. And because she was playing with Danielle Collins, they had a huge team supporting them this week, and they were able to keep their kind of farewell run going all the way to the final. So that added a lot of enjoyment because they were in the final playing against Krejcikova and Siniakova. Of course, Collins also had a pretty good week in singles, which I think kind of helped in terms of being the right partner for Coco. They'd actually never played with each other before this week, even though they'd obviously known each other and friends from Billie Jean King Cup and stuff. So it was a good end to the tournament because Collins and Vandeweghe reached the final, and there was like a retirement tribute as well on court for Vandeweghe and celebrating her career and stuff. Which, like, I guess on the court she did some good things in 2017 and 18, like career wise, tennis wise, and I think now she's just going to go straight into broadcasting, and this was it for her. So
she's been working for the BBC for the last year or two, and I actually think she's a pretty decent commentator.
Yeah, she speaks well.
Yeah, she does. I mean, I know she's not everyone's favorite person.
Yeah,
but
I was just going to caveat because of like some political opinions and stuff like that. But I firmly think like just we can put that aside and talk about her tennis, because I think it was pretty cool to just watch it in person, and she was nice and everything to the media and the press conference. So she definitely added something, I would say, to this tournament, because we know her in San Diego. So that's something I just wanted to say, because it's not always that the doubles gets the most attention.
No,
and it absolutely should. But I felt compelled to watch more doubles this week because of the storyline, and also just seeing Krejcikova and Siniakova do their thing up in person is just amazing what they've achieved as a duo.
I mean, they're probably one of the best doubles teams ever, right?
Ever, yeah. And I think like they're Krejcikova is only the second active player behind Venus Williams to have won like a major in mixed and doubles and singles. And she won the French Open, she won doubles and singles. Here she wins doubles and singles again, and I think they've won every major all twice except for the U.S. Open, which they won once. So they're 7-time major champions. They won Olympic gold. They won the WTA finals, and yeah, they make it look so easy, but it's really not. Some weeks they had some really tough competition as well, and yeah, they certainly did at times in this tournament too. But it was just cool to see it.
Yeah. Okay. Watch more doubles. Watch more doubles. I'm always up for a bit of doubles after tonight's Davis Cup epic in the men's side.
Yeah.
All right. So definitely worth mentioning the doubles. Let's also mention the winner of Osaka, Ashlyn Kruger. 19 years old, American, beat Zhu Lin in the final. Wasn't expecting that. Thought it would go to a Chinese or Japanese player. That title, to a good warm up. Lots of fuss being made about Ashlyn Kruger. Obviously, she's 19. She's the same age as Goff, or both born 2004 anyway. And I was basically going to ask she's basically seems to be breaking through at sort of a more standard age than Goff did. But have you ever seen Kruger play? And how much hype should we be giving her?
I think she's worthy of the hype in that she didn't drop a set this week, and she's already won a WTA title at 19. So that's kind of impressive, and she's in the top 75 now. So I think her trajectory has been fairly steady this year. She's won a 125 already this year too. She beat Tatiana Maria, I think, in the final, like 7-5 in the third. She's also won some matches. I think at tour level, she won a match in Montreal. And this week, to lose Zhu Lin is also a pretty good effort, because Zhu Lin's had a pretty good year, and she just hits a really big ball. And she's just really really aggressive, and I haven't seen her play a ton, but I will say she's a good power player. Like she has a big serve, big ground strokes. She definitely has weapons that would see her into the top 50 very quickly. Maybe even by the end of the year, who knows? And I think her game is made for hard courts. It seems like. So
we're definitely seeing a lot of up and coming American women at the minute. Obviously, Coco Gauff has been up and coming for years, but you've got Kruger, you've got Navarro. It's probably Peyton Stearns after the US. That's probably exciting for American tennis fans. At least I hope so, unless they're just that obsessed with only waiting for a male champion.
No, I think we have some good depth on the WTA. It's always been the WTA for us in the last 20 years. Our male players have just not been delivering consistently. Our biggest stories are usually, oh, look, there's 3 of them in the quarters. Whereas on the women's side, it's well, yeah, but they've dominated tennis the last 20 years. So
yeah, we've got some good names, and we've also got some good names in Guadalajara. We touched a little, which is the tournament that's starting tonight, actually, or my time, right now. I don't know what time it is. It's 20 past 11 for me. But today Guadalajara got underway, and we talked a little bit about the draw. Obviously, the top 7 are missing. The top seeds are out of form. Yeah, this draw's wide open, right?
Yeah, I feel like there's going to be a time that someone else wins. Someone who's kind of not on our radar is going to win it this time. Maybe an unseeded player. Okay. I'm very curious to see how Jabeur bounces back this week. It was a pleasure to talk to her before the tournament started, and she's just she was bringing her usual positive vibes, and she's just it's been kind of a tough time for her with the sickness, and then she had some back issues against Potapova in San Diego. But I'm wondering if that's starting to get better for her. She plays Alicia Parks in the first round, so another kind of tough opponent. But if she can get the serve back, and then I think, and if she's feeling good physically, then she should be able to get through that match. But with her top section, she also has Haddad Maya in there and Alexandrova. I would say if Jabeur is at her best, she has a good chance of going pretty deep and maybe even winning it. But because she's not, I think it's just going to open up the draw a bit more for Garcia. Is kind of a mystery to me, because she played a very good match against Thone this week and a very good third set. and that was some of her 2022 level. But then the next match she just comes out and she just looks lost in terms of tactics. And we know she's kind of very stubborn about her return position, and she's just not able to limit the unforced errors right now. It's just a bit too high. So I would say maybe it's a good chance for someone like maybe Madison Keys can continue her U.S. Open run, and maybe she could have maybe like Keys and Azarenka or Bencic, like those three type of players. I'm thinking could do well this week, just because they've had previous success in Mexico as well, which I think like helps them in their favor, and also just like the rest of the field I'm just not so sure about in this draw.
Keys is my title pick when I did my draw, but I was looking through my draw going, this is going to be absolute chaos, and I got down to my quarterfinals and semifinals. I was like, yeah, Keys is the one with the momentum here. So and she's been having a pretty good second half of the year, quarterfinals at Wimbledon as well. So there's a 1,000 title in her.
Yes.
JI on X also had the similar prediction.
Did he pick Keys to win it?
Yeah, he's got Keys winning it, beating Azarenka in the final. So he's big on Azarenka. However, he and I both invested in Sloane Stephens as well, who's a bit of a Guadalajara specialist.
Yes.
Stephens, all unseeded. So JI's got her in his semis. I've got her in my final. Bencic is one I think could do well, but she's blowing very hot and cold at the minute, and I don't know where she's at. If she's on, she's a threat, but she's very difficult to predict. And where she is, Pliskova might be on for a good run. She just has a decent draw. There's some opportunities for maybe not someone to necessarily break through, although definitely there, but maybe for someone who's a bit more of an established name to kind of relight the fire, as it were. If Max was here, I'm pretty sure we'd be getting that song in the chat. But yeah, at the minute, I think I'd agree that the person with the most momentum to take advantage of is Madison Keys.
Yeah, I would also say Danielle Collins. Actually, she has the momentum, but if she can just
had Admire in round one.
Yeah,
that's a fun match.
that's going to be awesome. And then the winner of that could play maybe Peyton Stearns too, who has a good amount of momentum right now. I would say the early rounds are always where it's at, like usual. So there's some opportunity. Even someone like Fernandez, I saw enough good there this week where I'm like, okay, actually, like she can put together some 3 or 4 wins in a row. It wouldn't shock me.
Fernandez has always shown that opportunity. She's just always had a tough draw really quick. I agree. Fernandez she's
also had some success in Mexico. She's won the 2 titles that she won were in Mexico, right?
Yeah, Monterrey, I think.
Monterrey, okay, yeah.
I think she's got a decent enough draw. She can get a win or 2 under her belt and maybe get something going. I would be well up for that. I'd love to see Leylah Fernandez winning 1,000.
Yeah, she was such a draw favorite. She was such a crowd favorite here too. I think pretty much everywhere.
I think, what have I got on?
I would say another popcorn match to watch: Townsend versus Tomljanovic.
Yes.
Yeah.
If that's on my time zone, I'm definitely watching that. For sure. That's I'm always up for watching Taylor Townsend. But against Isla, who's trying to come back, like there's going to be some fire in that match. There was another match that's like, I don't have the draw in front of me. There's a Mexican player who's playing Eugenie Bouchard in round 1. And I don't know if that's going to be a great match, but I can imagine that could be a headline maker of Mexican wins around at the biggest tournament in Mexico.
Yeah, I think you're talking about Renata Zarazua.
Yes, Zarazua. I don't know. I've never watched her play.
She's had a lot of success at the ITF. She's had a lot of success at the ITF level, but I haven't seen her play like a top WTA season pro yet in a big time match. So that would be kind of fun to watch, and I'm sure all the locals will get behind her. Yes, I guess so.
I mean, okay, Bouchard from 2013, 14, 15.
Yeah.
Before all the injuries.
It's still also a mystery whether she's actually going to play tennis next year, Bouchard. But
because I thought she'd retired and then she turns up in the draw. So I don't know.
I think she's like playing pickleball next year. She's on the tour, but I don't know if she's going to be doing tennis at the same time, or she'll definitely play through this year, but I don't know about next year.
To see how that one goes, how that develops, and keep sticking with us for all the developments. We will be back next week for more WTA Weekly. We will round up the Guadalajara tournament and be talking about who the eventual winner is. Will it be Madison Keys? Will it be Lola Fernandez? Will it be Sloane Stephens? Or will someone break through and win their first big title? Vanch, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me about San Diego, and thank you for all of the content that came out. I was absolutely loving all the press conferences, getting to know a bit more about the players, and hearing your questions. So always great talking tennis, and great job this week.
Thanks a lot, man. I really appreciate it, and it's fun to talk tennis with you always. So anytime.
Right, and it's always fun talking tennis with you all as well. So until next time, keep on talking tennis.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell so you don't miss out on all things tennis.